Beautiful in and out. Someone who is smart, who is intelligent. So I want like the total package.
The No Ordinary Love Podcast with Rosalind Onell. Every relationship is unique and has its own rhythm and melody. If what worked for them may not necessarily work for you. Welcome here again, another week at No Ordinary Love Pod. I'm always so excited. This is like part of the highlight of my week to have these conversations. I'm here today with Nayah, and I'm going to let Nayah introduce herself and tell us a little bit about how she got to where she is right now in her life in this moment. A little bit of background on Nayah.
Thank you for having me on No Ordinary Love Pod. I'm excited to be here. My name's Nayah Ndefru. I am an entrepreneur, a mom of two, and I think I like to describe myself as a general creative. Most people know me as the founder of Zolani Beauty, which is a makeup brand which I created, and it's named after my daughter, Zolani. The idea behind the brand was to create space, not only to have products that cater to skin tones like mine and yours and deeper, but to create a platform for engaging conversation about skin tone, colorism, and all the things that affect us as how we present as women in the world, and also to talk about the things that have held us back and to create space to uplift, empower, educate, inspire, and all the goodies. Yeah, that has allowed me to transition out of my job where I worked in corporate education as well as a clinical scientist in public health as well for many, many years. And I'm just enjoying this journey. There's been a lot of learning, but yeah, I'm enjoying this pivot and learning. I'm also a podcaster as well. Yeah. And so I just love to be in spaces where we can really have genuine and authentic conversations that really speak to the heart and hopefully impact minds and are able to reshape and reframe our thinking.
No, absolutely. Definitely a woman after my heart too. I'm curious. You said you're an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurial journeys are like another thing I'm always passionate about. I love it when women kind of take charge of their destinies and lead in this way. But I'm curious, what kicked you off or made you desire to get into being like a makeup entrepreneur? I know that there's a kind of scientific connection there with your clinical work, but from more of a heart space, why was it important for you to bring Zolani into the world?
Oh, that's such a great question. I like the way you asked it. And this is our brand story. It's when my daughter was born, she, um, you know, I have two kids. My son is 2 years older than Zolani. And how would I say this? When Zolani was born, she came out with a deeper complexion than mine, right? And my heritage is Cameroonian, but I grew up in Ohio I was born in Kentucky by way of Ohio, but my heritage, cultural background is Cameroonian. So I define myself as an African woman, right? So we embrace all the African aunties that we've grown up with, which could be my mom's siblings or her friends. And we've been really blessed with a nice African diaspora, community. So we grew up with Ugandans, Nigerians, Kenyans, who were my mom and dad's really close friends. So those were our aunts and uncles growing up in Kentucky and Ohio. So when Zolani was born, African culture, the aunties and uncles visit. And it was a bit shocking to me, some of the things they said. It was, "Oh, I didn't expect your daughter to be so dark." And I can't forget one was like, "Oh, she has such an African nose." I was like, And these were thoughts I never imagined when I looked at my daughter, but they were projected on me by people visiting. And these are people I've known my whole life. But then it rang true to a number of the conversations I had had with my siblings. And now my siblings are all deeper skin tones than I am. Kind of like all my aunts and uncles will have one person who came out like my complexion or lighter, and then everyone else is deeper. It's just the way our family is. So in my mom's children, I'm the one who was lighter skinned. So I remember my sister at 30 saying, I've never really felt beautiful. And my mom always wore lipstick or a little bit of blush, but I never saw her wear foundation. And now looking through the eyes of a mother, from the eyes of a mother, it was, while I understood it intrinsically before, now I felt like I really got to experience it, what colorism really means. And there are times I've had conversations that made me feel uncomfortable, but maybe because of my skin tone, I I didn't really take it in. But now the protective mom is like, whoa, you we're not going to be saying those things. So creating Zolani Beauty initially was just a passion project to find colors that made my mom and my sister feel beautiful, to find things, because when you're not represented in on the shelves, they're not saying it directly, but it's implied that your skin tone is not important. And this was before Fenty came out with 40 plus shades and, all the new brands that have tons of shades. We started Zolani Beauty with 6 foundations that were from my skin tone and deeper. And so over the years, we've just added more and more colors to be appropriate. But no, to cater to more people.
Yeah.
Yes. But it was initially just designed to create space, and it just evolved. When I created the foundation, my sis would say, wow, I look so pretty. Now, my sister is a beautiful girl, right? She's a beautiful woman. But there's sometimes I look at makeup as clothing for your face, right? So it's kind of like you put on a pretty dress and you feel different. So it's the same thing with your face. So for the people who are like, oh, do you need makeup to be beautiful? No. But it does enhance the way you look or the way you feel, and there are times when your skin is not its best and you still want to present your best self. And so these are tools that you can have in your toolbox. So that's the long story.
No, that's great. That's a great story. I think
Zolani Beauty.
it's like armor for makeup is like armor for you, right? It
Yeah,
can enhance your mood. It can make you go into a space with a certain vibe just based on the kind of makeup you're
absolutely.
wearing. I love, love, love makeup. So I will, any excuse to like get my makeup done. That's me. I'm gonna get my makeup
Right.
done. So
Exactly.
I can definitely understand that. And it sounds like this was born from the love, and it's amazing in our communities. I'm Nigerian originally myself, so I get the whole scenario and the whole context. And my father was extremely dark, and I love dark skin. I'm very like attracted to dark skin, but
Mhm.
I can remember so many incidences where he was treated differently because he was so much darker. And none of us, his kids, are as dark, but I suspect I don't have a child. If I have a child, I wouldn't be shocked if one of my kids were then as dark in complexion as he
Right.
was, just depending on how like
Hmm.
the person is. So it's definitely something I can resonate with because I definitely like saw a lot of his pain, even as a man dealing with colorism from that context. So definitely hear about the love you have for your daughter. I'm just curious in your own life, how has love showed up in terms of a romantic love in your life? Kind of what has been your story around that, as much as you're comfortable sharing?
Ooh. I have lots of stories. Well, okay. Let's go from the back forward. I'm
Mhm.
divorced.
Mm.
Um, so the father of the two kids I talked about, we were married in 2010. He's Kenyan. And when we met, I was in this space where it's like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if this marriage thing is for me. And one day I was working internationally at the time. So I was doing work in Kenya and going back and forth. And we met at church. And,
In
we
Kenya or
started
here?
in Kenya.
Okay.
Yeah, we met at church in Kenya. And I tend to be an all or nothing kind of person. Like, so I was a member of this church. I was serving, and I remember coming off of a trip, and there was choir practice, and I said, I got to get off this plane and go go for choir practice. I didn't get my bags or anything. I was like, I'm not going to be late. So that was the day we met, because turns out my luggage was lost anyway, and someone was telling me, there's this guy, he works for the airlines, so you should talk to him. So that's how I met my current ex. um, and prior to meeting him, I had a list, as many of us have or may not, but I had a list of, the things I was looking for. And I remember it had maybe 19 items on that list. And I forgot about the list. And when I'm a friend of mine, we were working at the same place, and she somehow found my list. It's so fortuitous. I don't know how this happened, but she found my list and said, Naya, I found your list. I'm like, oh my gosh, send me a picture, because let me see if this guy checks off the items that I had written on my list. And true to form, he did. He checked off all 18 out of 19. And the 19th one was a credit score, which, because we were in Kenya, we didn't really have a barometer for what
Mhm.
credit score was. So probably 19 out of 19, honestly.
Wow.
And that was very intriguing to me. But I think it all made sense when my mom said, I was back in the US at some point, and was with my mom, and I'm driving. I'm like, if I get married, I'd like to get married outside, have an outdoor wedding. And then my mom looked at me and she's like, you want to get married? And I was like, maybe I do. Yeah. And I think at that moment it hit that, if it turns out that this guy is ask me, I think I'll say yes, because it felt right. I come from a
Mm.
very, well, at that time I was in my very religious Christian girl phase of my life. So, you know, very principled in terms of, we were not having, our dates were very structured. I would come with a list of questions. I come with thought points, and we would have to address the thought points
Mhm.
before, we go into anything else. So we would say,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on family, on children, on,
Mhm.
so very quickly we got into the real essence of
Mhm.
each other and the things that were important to us, and our values really aligned at the time. And it just made sense. Like, I felt that he understood me in a way that I felt that nobody else did.
Mhm.
And it was more of a cerebral, like, yes, than anything. Obviously, I was attracted to him, and,
Mhm.
but from our religious perspectives, it was, no sex before marriage. And I was in my 30s,
Mhm.
well, was I in my 30s? I was almost 30.
Mhm.
Girl, I don't remember. But yeah,
That's okay.
so it doesn't matter. Yeah, so we were keeping ourselves pure, that purity culture. And
Mhm.
so our wedding night was the first time we consummated the marriage. I really hate these terms right now
Yeah.
in this new season of my life, but I'm giving you context, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so Mark and
So
I, go ahead.
I was going to ask, so it seems like you did everything by the book, right? Or
Hmm.
by the principles that you felt would give you a certain result. Where do you think the disconnect was between all those principles that you gave? It sounds like you were doing all the things. You were asking the difficult questions from a faith perspective, which I
Yes.
respect. You were abstaining sexually, you were seeking God and seeking all the things. So where would you say is the disconnect?
I would say communication. I think everything kind of falls in that, whether it's finances, how are you meeting your physical, emotional, spiritual needs? Everything rises and falls on communication. And I don't think we were very well equipped. Now, Mark, my ex, well, we have a podcast out talking about, so everybody knows his name. So, talking about our breakup and everything like that. I think we're very good communicators in terms of how we communicate with others. We're good at asking questions. We're good at even intuitively sensing people's needs. But I think at some point, we were not doing that for each other. And I would say more so him than me.
Him than
Obviously,
you
this
in
is
what?
my perspective.
Yeah, you know, we each
Yeah,
have our truths, and then there's the truth, and we each have our perspective, and then there's the truth in
exactly.
between. Can you clarify that? I just didn't follow.
Yeah, so meaning I felt that I continued to try to put communication on the table. How
Mhm,
are you feeling about this? Why are we not connecting? Can we create space to connect? So initially we would have date night, and, as we had children, it kind of died down for a season, which is expected, or not, but things changed, right? We went through several transitions. And I think with every transition, we're also evolving and changing as people.
mhm,
So recognizing how we were changing was something that we didn't really talk about as much, and how to meet each other's needs
mhm,
as we were changing in these seasons. So whether it's, you know, so I would say, for example, we moved countries. We were living in Kenya, and then we moved to the United States. So in Kenya, I was on my entrepreneurial journey. Initially, I was working in public health, doing some capacity building work, and he was working, doing his aerospace stuff. And then we moved to the US. He worked remotely for about a year and then was unemployed for maybe 18 months or so. So he was a stay at home dad. So again,
mhm,
a transition. And I was working in, quality assurance or whatever, corporate job. And then we moved. We moved from Ohio, where we initially kind of landed, where my parents lived, to Indiana. So another transition. Um, and we transitioned between having one child to two children, and then moved state again, right? I lost my job. And then so we were at also a time when none of us had income coming in. And then, so we had multiple transitions. I think transitions are opportunities to, now in hindsight, I think transitions are opportunities to really solidify your relationship, to
mhm,
say, okay, let's get back to the foundation and reassess and recognize what we really need in this moment, and
mhm,
how we can best support each other, support our family, and grow through this together as opposed to grow apart. So I think taking inventory of each other's needs. Now, why I said I felt like I was more engaged, was because I kept asking questions. Are you okay? Are we okay? Can we create time to go on dates? And all of those things kind of died. So at some point I said, well, how about a micro date? Like on our way back from work, let's stop and have coffee. So it's just you and me time for 10 minutes, or 5 minutes. That's how I do with the gym when I haven't gone for a while.
There's research on that actually, that's a great way to form
Yes.
new habits. I'm curious, did you guys have any counseling when you started? If so, and what kind of counseling did you have? And did you have any counseling as you went through all these transitions? And I agree, transitions are so difficult on relationships in general,
Hmm.
and definitely you need to navigate those
Right.
gently. But I'm just curious about that.
So we had some premarital counseling, and excuse me, if I was a premarital counselor, we had premarital counseling, and one of the church we attended in Nairobi was very big on having accountability couples. So we did have an accountability couple. When we did have some issues, I would go to them and say, "Hey, this is what we're facing." And they would come over to our house and we would sit down and we'd talk about it. And that was pretty much all we had. I think somewhere along the way, we went to some funny guy. What's his name? He's like a Christian funny guy. Mark somebody.
Mhm.
Yeah. We went to one of his conferences. We did a few things online, but I don't know. I don't think his heart was really in it. Now,
Mm.
what was the big thing? One of the big things was we had a change. Now, I know this now, but Mark was really going through some changes with his faith. He was having, I don't like to call it a faith crisis, but a faith reawakening, right? So his perspectives on, let's say, theology are very different now than they were when we met. And mine are too. But we evolved at different times, right? So this is where I feel like if we were communicating, and I was not understanding, right? I had two kids, and also his beliefs on marriage as a whole shifted.
Mm.
So
That's a
he,
lot of pressure.
a lot.
Do you mind? Is it something he shared openly? Do you mind
Yes, he
sharing?
shared it openly. So again,
Yeah.
you can go listen to it. But, we entered into a monogamous relationship, but now he believes in polyamory.
Uh,
So
that's not what you signed up
this
for.
is not what I signed up for, my sister. How do we go from, I have one friend who summed it up so nicely. He goes, Naya, I also went to seminary in the DC area for youth and family counseling, right? So it was just one of my side projects. I felt like, in our communities, we really struggle and we need people who are aligned, and I wanted it from a faith perspective as well. So he's like, how do you go from the girl who was in seminary to being married, and now you have a podcast talking about unpacking your divorce and polyamory?
Yeah.
Like, that's life, the
That is
circle of
life.
life.
That is
Yeah.
definitely life. It throws you curveballs. And I think marriage throws you curveballs. And one of the things I've learned just from my own divorce as well is that we're not, let me speak for myself. I wasn't taught that people evolve and you have to leave room. That's why, like, I think understand having the same core values is important. And then you have to leave room for the unexpected ways in which people may grow or evolve. I know I couldn't do we're monogamous because I'm strictly monogamous, and then moving. And I'm also older at this point, moving to being a polyamorous thing. I've had friends who've done that, and unfortunately, for the friends that have done it, and it works for some, it didn't work for them at all. In fact, they ended up getting divorced over the situation. So definitely understand in that way, but I'm curious what do you know now about marriage and relationship that you wish you had known the night you got married, the night you consummated your marriage?
Hmm. I thought I knew how to ask hard questions, but I don't think I knew how to ask intimate questions.
Mm. And what is
So
the distinction?
I would say, and I know this is no ordinary love. So really questions about love, whether it's, the different types of love. The Mark and I are great friends, but we are not romantic partners, right? So
Mm.
the romance was eroding and I didn't know how to challenge that.
Yeah.
One, I think it was shame from my Christian programming, right? I went to an all girls boarding school in Cameroon. Okay.
So did I. Except in
So,
Nigeria.
yes. So all girls Catholic boarding school.
And I miss
So
the Catholic, but
for the bigger part of your life, you've been told, close your legs, do not open your legs. Then, as soon as you graduate, where's your husband? I'm like, so these things, they are not aligning,
They're not
aunties.
compatible. And the interesting thing is, like, it is a process to move from that mindset to a
Hmm.
mindset of, oh, sex is something that
Can be
can be
enjoyed.
enjoyed, and sex is
Yes,
something that I need to have agency over my own sexual needs as a woman, independent of my partner, independent of him as a man and what he may need. And unless I am in relationship with you and understanding what I need sexually, like, like, no one's a mind reader. How's he gonna know what you need or want sexually
exactly.
if you
And
don't
I
even
don't
know it for yourself, right?
thank you. And I don't
But
think he knew how to ask me as well.
yeah.
So we had great chemistry at times, but after a while, it was completely off,
Mm,
you know? And then I just felt like, so yeah, really bringing that intimate communication to the table, you know, I didn't know how to do that. And I think that was a big part of it.
mhm.
But also check ins, I think not negotiating with the check ins with your spouse. You know, some people may do it on a daily basis, but then really sit down and say, these are our performance indicators.
That's not unusual, though. I know a couple that actually does it, like, using a business framework, like they check into
Mm-hmm.
their relationship weekly using a business framework. But
Yeah.
whatever works for you. I think
Yes,
I think
yes,
it's
yes.
so necessary. Sorry, I interrupted
Yeah.
you.
No, no, no. So if I think along the way, if we be like, things in the bedroom were not so good this week. Do we want to talk about that? You know, or Naya, I don't like this new hobby of yours where you're getting your nails done every every week. Can we check in on our finances a little more
Mhm.
intentionally? Or I know we have two children now and we really want to plan for their future, but can we also live in the now? I think the targets are also moving. So maybe initially it could have been like, oh, this is how we're planning for our future. But then when you go through transition and things change, money changes, you're changing, your body is changing, your mind is changing. You can look at things differently. There may be times when it's time to party, and then there's times when it's time to buckle down. But I think if we're aligned, if we were checking in, if we were communicating more, one, probably wouldn't have stayed as long because
Yeah.
I would have known sooner. It would have been easier to pull this out. And
Mhm.
two, I think that it's actually very prudent to have a therapist or a counselor that you just check in with who can help you navigate some of these things that you probably didn't know how to navigate. So now when I think of a couple getting married, I'm like, who is there a therapist in the area that I can connect them with? I think that's
Mhm.
such a great gift, maybe for the
Oh,
first year or
I am
stuff like that.
therapy 100%. Like,
Yes,
I believe in therapy even once you know that you're going to be serious in this relationship. I think you should get a therapist, because I think there's a lot
100%.
of conversation you can have prior, and then you can just set yourself up for better habits as
Hmm.
opposed to waiting till some disaster happens. But I do also agree with what you said about getting out earlier. I think it's so, and that's also why I believe in, like, therapy even before you make some sort of major commitment, because the chances of you picking the therapist helping you pick out on what is going on. And I I had, like, a faith-based counseling, and there is amazing, great faith-based counseling that's also psychology based. But I would never get married unless I'm doing a faith and psychology based counseling, because
Thank you.
I believe in faith, and I believe in prayer and therapy. I believe in
Hmm.
both. And both go hand in hand towards helping you have the kind of marriage that you want, because there's just so much, like, there's the blueprint we get from our parents as the blueprint he got from his parents, I got from my parents. That's already a difference. If you're from different countries, that's already another difference.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have just life ups and downs. Those are
Yes.
differences and transitions and all that. So I think that there's just so much about marriage that's always
So
fascinating
many
to me.
layers. I think we're just,
Yeah.
scratching the surface, but yeah.
But how would you define love today then?
Okay, let me
How would
look
you
at my
define no
notes.
ordinary love for yourself today?
No ordinary love. So, a lot of people look at my relationship with my ex and
Mhm.
think that we're still in a relationship, like a romantic relationship. Divorce is very painful. Like, I went through pain that I didn't know that was existed, you know, when navigating breakup and putting myself back together. No wonder they call it breakup, because literally it feels like you're being
You're breaking.
fragmented, But to be able to navigate that and still look at him and recognize that he's my friend and my ally, I think is a new type of love. It's not ordinary. And
Mhm.
that's why we started our podcast, as people were like, how do you guys do this? So I think you can have pain and still love, you know.
Mhm.
You can be hurt and still love. I think too many people have used pain and hurt and equated it with lack of love. I think love is just a deeper understanding of our human existence and having grace for every moment. Now, they talk about the different kinds of love. So before coming on, like, No Ordinary Love podcast, I was like, what is love? So I started researching and I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I remember these. There's four, and different schools of thought will say there's eight, others say there's seven, and all of this.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think on the very basic, there's the romantic, what do you call that? Whatever. There's agape, there's like the love you have for your children and all of that. So I think we have an enormous capacity to love. But what I know now about love is that it has to be intentional. It doesn't happen by chance, it has to be intentional. It has to, I think intention is really a great word to sum it up. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You have to be very, very intentional about there's not just the feeling of love, but there is the compatibility necessary to actually love this person on the days that you feel like just killing the person. Because even when you do all the things, even when you do all the therapy and all of that, it's like any other relationship. You're going to have moments where it's really difficult, but if you are able to remember why you're here with this person, and then that hopefully that gets you through it, right? If you're able to respect the person through all the challenges, then
Yes.
yeah, that gets you through it as well. But we've been talking a lot about love and your love. I think we're going to move now to the next segment, the relationship rundown segment of the show, where we
Okay.
discuss trends,
Mm,
like trends going on. And today we're focused really on trends around not just breakups, but trends around self love and acceptance, which I think is a huge precursor to being in a healthy relationship. Because if you can't be in a healthy relationship with self, then it's that much more difficult to be in relationship with someone else. So we will start with the first video. I think it's recovering after losing yourself
okay.
in a breakup.
I don't love myself. And since my ex left, I don't even know who I am anymore. I know since your breakup or your divorce, you lost your identity. You felt like a piece of yourself left along with them. So I know this chapter of your life is terrifying. Before you met them, life was just there, and you seemed to be just existing in it. But then your ex came along and gave it meaning, gave it color, gave it flavor, gave it a scent. But since your ex left, your life has just been colorless. And the future that you were building together has just been shattered into 1,000 pieces. And now you're alone, abandoned, and betrayed. You just want them back so life can go back to how it was with them. And I'm here to tell you, you won't get it. If you don't love yourself, your relationship will never be fulfilling because you're coming from a place of lack. You're coming from a place of being incomplete. Your ex or any romantic partner for that matter should not complete you. They should complement you. I'm not saying that your partner should not have an impact on your life and not make it better. Not at all. I'm saying when they validate your entire existence, now you have a problem. Because what happens when they leave? Who are you then? If you love someone more than you love yourself, it all becomes about them. You're only focused on their love and not the love that matters the most, and that's the love that you have for yourself. So the solution, use this time of the breakup or the divorce to focus on loving yourself more than you love your ex. Stop exhausting all your energy on getting your ex back and focus on getting you back.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with him. I was, after my divorce, that was something that I became very intentional about in terms of just learning who I was as a person and learning what I wanted out of life as a person. And taking that time out has made the world of difference for me because I've really learned what makes me happy. I've created a life for myself that brings all the things into my life that makes me happy. So, regardless of whether I have a partner, a long-term partner in the future, or I don't have, I have created for myself the life that I want. And I think that has made a world of difference for me. I think one of the things that has been really important for me is when we talk about self-care or self-love, it's not just the pampering, which is really important. The getting your nails done, getting your hair done, all that, those things. But I think what's even more important are the emotional ways in which we take care of ourselves. Because what I've learned is it's not just your romantic relationships that are sometimes that are a reflection of where you are emotionally. Even your friendships are a
Mhm.
reflection of where you are emotionally. And I found that, ooh, wow, there were so many similarities in the kinds of people that were in my life and the kinds of as friends and the kinds of romantic partners I may have had. So
Mm.
just being very intentional about cleaning slates in a lot of ways after my divorce was something that I definitely did. But what do you think of the video and the thoughts and the points that he made?
I agree with the fact that he's like, life will never go back to the way it was. And it's nothing that I long for. So that's okay. And loving myself has been also a journey of rediscovery. I agree with you. Sometimes for me, self care, the pampering is great, but also learning to put boundaries, when to say no to stuff, when to say yes. And even to my children and my family, putting blocks on my time and really giving myself space to rediscover this new person outside of that relationship. And I think it takes time. I think I'm still figuring it out. I knew who I was before getting into the marriage, but when you go into the marriage with that covenant mindset, I was locked in. You know what I mean? I was locked in. So again, it felt like you're kind of tearing up some stitches, ripping the band-aid off, whatever analogy you can use. So there's definitely healing that needs to happen. So self-love to me has been a big part of it. Therapy or finding programs that have helped me really intentionally put myself back together again and creating space. And I mean, you talked about friends, even with your family. Like, I feel like sometimes no one really understands what you're going through when you're going through a divorce, even people who are divorced.
Yeah.
As an individual, I think our experiences are so different because some people will bounce right back, and some people just take a longer time. And either way, it's okay, you know? But yeah, I think focusing on loving yourself is really important because when we can love ourselves, then we can really fully love others, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would I would add to that, making room for the understanding that you did the best you can, the best you could in the moment. And it's something that I had to learn, like being so hard on myself for making certain mistakes that I felt I made and not giving myself the grace I needed that, oh wow. Because it's not just this person, this other partner may have done all these things wrong. I think the most difficult question is, yes, they may have done all these things, but why was I in this situation? Why did I stay and remain in this situation? What was it about me that caused that? And I think while it was a very difficult question, it was a very freeing question when I became willing to work through that and what that meant for me. So I think that's a big part of it. And like you said, everyone's divorce is different. So it becomes really challenging to find a safe space to talk about what's happened. For me, I did not just a group kind of divorce care program, but I also did therapy at the same time. And the combination is what helped me, because it was great to have conversation with other people who had divorces, but their situations were different. And it was great to also kind of dive deep into my own stuff with the
Yeah.
therapist. So that combination really, really helped me. But I think the next video, unless, do you have anything else you want to say about that one?
No.
Okay. The next video, I think it's getting to the person that's just for you.
The breakup is often the blessing. My first marriage was not her fault. It was my fault. I was married too young. I shouldn't have been nobody's husband. I learned so much from that. What you see is a direct result of a divorce, and then finding that soulmate, locating that one person that's just was made just for me. Just for me. Now, sometimes to get to the person that's just for you, you got to go through a couple bad ones. You can be in love with the wrong person. Everybody in here done been with somebody they had no damn business being with. And somehow you end up with the right one.
I'll let you go first. Steve Harvey's an interesting one.
I know. He said, the breakup is often the blessing. It definitely did not feel like that, but I love the woman that I'm becoming in this season of my life. So even if I don't meet a partner, I am really, really enjoying Nayah right now. Yeah. It's been a process, because there's a time when it's just like, oh, it just felt so hard. And there are times it still does, but I am loving the person that I am becoming. And I do believe there was, so when my ex and I first broke up, I was done. I was like, never again. I have one friend.
Miss me with that.
I have one friend who said, Nayah, you need to calm down. I said, why? He said, there's hope. I said, okay. He said, okay, read this book. I think it was, what is that movie that had Julia Roberts? She was like going to Bali and all these other places.
Oh, Eat, Love, Pray.
Yes. So I think it was Eat, Love, Pray Part 2 or something, the book. He said, you need to read this. And I read it, and I said, I don't know why that book was such a pivotal turning point for me, but it definitely made me rethink my closed mindset. And I will say, when I first got out, when Mark and I ended, I was in a relationship with a gentleman, great guy, very nice. But because I had not worked on myself, I had not done the hard work, I couldn't really receive everything that he was giving. And I didn't really have as much to give either. If we fast forward, and he really wanted things to progress very quickly. Like, he wanted to get married, and I was just like, well, no, I'm out of here. So that ended. And yeah, I think, what was I watching somewhere? And they were like, you kind of need to, dating is like a learning experience. It's like reading a book, right? And unfortunately, and that book is yourself. So because 10 years after a marriage, you are a completely different person than that person I was 10 years ago. Plus, the world has changed.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness, being out
The
here on these
apps, girl,
streets,
the apps, these
I had
dating
never been on
streets.
an app
Ooh.
before this. So now I'm like, what is this?
Oh, you didn't
My
miss
sisters,
anything.
my brother, I have one brother, two sisters. They're like, you got to get on the apps. You got to try, Naya. You got to put yourself out there. This is how we're doing it now. I said, okay, let me get on these apps. Girl, that's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole
Like,
other episode for sure. The apps
yes.
are, it's interesting. A lot of the apps are, people are like turning away from the apps and like trying to date in real life. But I hear you. Like I told, it takes, there is the healing I think we do in theory from reading the books, from doing all that
Yeah.
work. And there's the healing we do in relationship, right? Because
Yes.
there is a version of you when you're in relationship with someone who isn't healthy, and in that relationship you may feel justified to protect yourself, but that version of you is not as vulnerable as is necessary when you're in a healthy relationship to be present with somebody else, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's a version of you when you're really liking someone and your emotions are really involved, that's different from when it's a guy you're just dating and like you already know this isn't gonna work and you're just trying to figure out how we're gonna bring this to an end, right?
Yeah.
the, oh, I can have all the boundaries then, but the difficulty
Yes.
becomes when you really like someone and you still have to put boundaries in place with the person,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So I hear you. And it's funny, I think I was talking with a friend and we pulled up the statistics, and 67% of second marriages fail, 73% of third marriages fail. And the reason is a lot of people just don't put in the work to, don't put in their own work, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that makes it so much more difficult to get to that person, like he was saying, that is your person, right?
Yeah.
And we learn in real time. So as difficult as those relationships are, if you do your work, then you have a much better chance of
Exactly. I
finding
think
that person.
it's both ends of the spectrum. Like the relationships are either really solid or
Mhm.
they're just, waiting to fall apart.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Just depending on if you put the work in or not.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
But I
And
think,
that
like you
work.
said, you can still be with the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
You can put in all the work you want, but if you're with
True.
the wrong person, it's still gonna be.
Yeah. Yeah. But I wonder if you could be really putting in the work and still end up with the wrong person. Like, how does that?
If you're really putting in the work and you still end up with the wrong person,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe you're not aligned on values.
But
Maybe
then,
you,
well, I guess
mhm.
it depends on how we define work, right?
Yeah,
Because,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because some people may have just worked on themselves and they really work on themselves, but did not align their values, and then that's a recipe for disaster as well.
Mhm. And
But
there's work you do, I think, as an individual, and there is, like you said, communication, right? There's a
mm-hmm.
way in which you need to learn to communicate. And all relationships, I believe it takes two to tango. You can't
Yeah.
want to be in the relationship and be putting in the work to be in the relationship and the other person isn't. It's not going to work. Just go have your party of one. Let's call it quit. That's my opinion, right? Yeah, I don't, yeah. That, I think that unless both people are fully committed to making it work. But I also don't, like, it's up to the two people in the relationship to decide whether it's working for them or not, right? So I don't know.
Yeah,
That's my thought about it,
I
right?
agree. I agree.
Yeah, who knows? The next video is let's go with 3 ways to heal after a breakup or
Okay.
divorce.
Are you still struggling with trying to heal after the end of your last relationship? Here are 3 things that you need to do in order to heal. And the third one you must do. Number 1, feel your feelings. We often try to distract ourselves. We don't want to cry. Let it out. Your emotions tell you a lot about what's going on the inside. Number 2, grieve the illusion. Oftentimes we're in relationship with the person we've created in our brain and not really what's happening in reality. You have to properly grieve what you hope for, what you hope would come out of the relationship and the actual relationship. And number 3, self-love. What does this mean? How do I put myself first? How am I prioritizing my wants, needs, and desires? There's probably a ton of other things you can do. But if you start with those three, you'll be further down the road in your healing journey.
You take it. You go ahead. Start.
Feel your feelings. I agree with that because this was me. I was like, I will not give him the pleasure of experiencing my tears. That was me. I remember saying that to my therapist, and he goes, Nayah, crying is a normal human response to grief, to pain. Cry.
Shed them tears. Shed the tears.
Let them flow, honey. Let it cleanse your soul. I was like, no, I would not cry. I would not. And I honestly think that held me back for a while because I refused to.
Mhm.
I was like, I felt like, and I don't know where this comes from. This may be this whole strong woman trope, but it was no. If I'm crying, it means I'm sad. But the reality is,
Like
yeah,
he's won. You think like he's won if you are
yes,
crying.
yeah, somewhere in my warped brain, somewhere that's my thoughts were, he's winning, not thinking it's me healing, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
So,
I'm definitely in terms of like similar. Like because I felt like there was so much chaos going on at the time my marriage was ending. I needed to like hold myself up to get through this.
mhm.
So, and it's something that I do because it happened even when my dad died. It happens when
Same,
I'm going through like other
same.
stressful things. I like, okay, this is not the time. And then maybe like 2 years later is
Yeah,
when
you
I
start
would find
processing your
myself
grief.
really processing the grief aspect of it. And like, I mean, I've had distance between my relationship ending and now. So, but what I do realize is like it takes a long time to process all these things out. And just because I'm good in this season and I feel like, oh, I've gotten all this stuff out, sometimes you repeat, you like make the same mistake over. It takes a while to get things, and that's okay. But I
It is
think
okay.
part of the learning has been just giving myself the grace and the space to get better each time. And it does get better each time because like relationships I've had since my divorce, I've like, oh, this is definitely like more aligned with who this person is more aligned with who I am as a person.
Mhm.
Um and learning that in real time has been illuminating, right? But it's the finding that balance to let out the feelings so that you can let in the love, I think. That has
Yes, yes. And I didn't realize that that was what was happening. I just, you're kind of like self protecting. And also from a mom, you're like, I can't fall apart. I think too many Tyler Perry movies made me feel like, I was like, I cannot be that woman who's flying all over the place, her hair going all crazy. Like, I will keep it together for
yeah.
myself, for my children, and whatever. But
Especially
it's
when you
okay.
feel like you're the stabilizing force for
Yeah,
everybody, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's tough. Definitely
And
tough.
like you said, 2 years later, like 2020, I experienced extreme grief, pain, and grief. Like, I remember just actually calling my kid's dad and saying, I'm going to need you to take care of these kids. I need
Mm,
to go away for a little bit.
mm,
And I went to Mexico, and it was just a crying retreat. Like, I don't know what, oh, well, I was going through a program
mhm,
that, and I think healing through that
mhm.
process, but that means revisiting a lot of that
Yeah.
stuff and processing it and understanding that season and this new season and giving it space and acknowledging it,
Mhm.
feeling it. And it was so overwhelming.
But that is the real self-care. That is the real self-love. That
Yes.
is the pampering, like we said, has its space, but that is, I think, healing, loving yourself in certain ways is a very private matter that you do behind closed doors, really. It's not the very public face It's not the
Mhm.
very like, oh, I'm getting my nails done, all that stuff. Because it is when you are faced with challenges, how am I going to show up in a way that I can feel like I'm honoring who I am, and like after I'm done, I'm proud of myself. And it's hard to make a different choice when you've learned one way, right? So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
go you. Good for you, Naya. Doing
Thank
that
you.
work, loving yourself. I love that.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to move to the group chat where we get questions from viewers. We have a couple questions this week. The first question is, my love life has been pretty much turned upside down in the last few years. The father of my child has been distant since he was born, and now I'm not sure if he even cares about me anymore. He just goes to work, comes home to eat dinner, plays with our son a little bit, then goes to sleep. He might work on a personal project or play a video game here and there, but never do anything. We never do anything as a couple. It's like he doesn't want anything to do with me. I work I work too, and we're both busy, but I just want him to actively try to make time for us. How can I get him to come around? I think, Naya, this question was meant for you. Look at that.
It's
Like
like she's
you can
reading my
use
life story.
yes. You can use your expertise. What would you have done differently? You kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier. What would
Yeah.
you have done differently?
I mean, the fact that she's saying that since their child was born, I don't know how old the child is, but it's an ongoing problem. So this is where communication is important. It's a hard conversation, but say, hey, maybe find a babysitter and say, can we have an hour just to chat? Find ways to reconnect, things that you liked doing or enjoyed doing. That one thing that my ex and I like to do is we like to watch series, which now I don't like to do anymore because
Watch
then
what?
you're like series. Some,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
What do you call them here? I don't know. I don't
Yeah, I
watch
know you
them.
mean like a show that
A
has
show that has
yeah,
multiple
multiple
episodes, yeah.
episodes. Yeah.
And we would binge watch them. That's how we would unwind on the weekends. And then even later on, we weren't doing that. At least you're in the same space, and watching the same thing, and then you could laugh about it. But I think revisiting some of the things that you guys liked to do together is a nice way to kind of open the doors. One thing I know for sure is the only person who's we're responsible for their actions is ourselves. Like, I choose how I respond in this situation. I choose how I even understand the situation. Now, there's a lot that can go into that. Generational trauma, how we understand situations can, that's a whole other conversation. But knowing your spouse, assessing the situation, one, that's good already. She's like, it's just not the same, so there's a problem. So acknowledging that there's a problem. Two is creating space to address it. You cannot fix a problem that's not been addressed. So one thing and I don't know if all men are the same, but what I've learned is anytime I told my ex we need to talk, he would immediately close up. So I learned how to infuse humor
Yeah.
into conversations, to find a fun way to talk about really important things. And even if that means like one thing I really enjoy doing is going to comedy shows, but I don't go just for the comedy. Some of them are really bad, but what I like is how they tell a story with
Mhm.
humor. I think it's really important, even for my kids, like learning to tell a story in a way that's really engaging, to capture someone's attention and get a point across without feeling like you're pointing fingers at them and wagging,
Yeah.
and all of that.
Yeah.
So maybe readdressing how you communicate to make some difficult topics palatable.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, there's no easy answer for that. You can't just make things go back to the way they were. Especially after having a baby, your body could have changed. He may have changed. Men also change. Men change, women change, and are his perspectives shifting? Is fatherhood, is it a trigger? Has it made him reassess his childhood. And sometimes, like I found out with my ex, he was really scared. Fatherhood brought out fear, major fear. Like he was now worried about bills in a way he'd never been worried before because of some things he'd experienced in his childhood. So it could be a number of things going on. But if you create the atmosphere for that person to be able to talk about some of those things, or what were the best things about your childhood, or what are some things in your childhood that you fear? Now that we're parents, maybe address it from that perspective to see if it's because that's the new thing is the baby. So that's the variable. So I think maybe discussions about the baby. Do you feel that I'm spending too much time with the baby? Or, I don't really have a very solid answer. This would be kind of one to engage with the person, but I would say ask questions, ask with grace and love, because it's a transition. That's what we started this conversation with, is you've transitioned into parenthood and now there's a new human being in this relationship, and that shifted the dynamics. So ask questions. This is actually something I've been working on in the background. It's not out yet, but I'm working on a worksheet, just to help people find interesting questions to ask to help spark conversation in relationships. Yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
important.
No, I think I ditto on like all the things. I think creating space, especially for men, I think there's an assumption of how, well, every human is different. And I think a big part of being in relationship with someone is being intentional about understanding how they receive information and being intentional about creating the space to deliver that information in a way that they can receive it. Because conversation is not just your intention, it is your impact as well. And if
Mm.
you are reaching or impacting this person in a way that they can't receive it, then you're just talking to yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that, we're not going to get anywhere with that. But I think all the things you said, creating that space, using humor, using hypotheticals, if having a direct conversation is too much for the person. I think I would hope, especially that in this context, you're already there, but like before this, I think this is where I believe foundation setting is so critical, is having conversations about how you have difficult conversations
Mm.
even ahead of time, and setting your own ground rules for all that, I think is critical. But I think it's also really hard in the moment when emotions are there to like do all
Yeah.
these things. So giving
When
grace and space to come back to a conversation too.
yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
When you feel that you've been neglected or you're not being seen, and these are things that I felt. I felt that
Yeah.
I was not seen. I'm here, I'm present, but you're not seeing me, you're not hearing me, you're not engaging. What is wrong with me? That was one thing. So I want to also say, please don't put that burden on yourself. You're perfect. Like we're all perfectly flawed. Yeah. So continue to work on yourself, continue to love yourself. But like, all the things that Rosalind has said and I've said, create space to grow from this. And hopefully, you know, it's not too late to.
Yeah, yeah. I really hope the intervention comes early, uh,
Hmm.
because that alone can make it like not work on its own. Okay.
Yeah.
So, our second question, my wife's sister hit on me when she was drunk. She wasn't aggressive, but she was definitely flirting. Is this the kind of thing that's worth telling my wife? Even if it will probably sour our relationship with her family. My gut says I should tell her, but thinking about the potential consequences makes my head spin. What would you want your husband to do in this situation? Not as a
Hmm.
husband, but as a friend. I would want to know, right?
Hmm.
Because I think hiding it actually creates the context for it to happen again. And transparency, I feel, is what allows a situation like this not to occur again in the future. And I feel like if it happened again with someone else, then I would feel guilty if I was the one and I didn't share it at all. But I would share it from a very kind of fact-based perspective, right? I think something like this is an opportunity if both people see it as an opportunity as to why is this behavior occurring? Why is this person flirting, right? If you cannot make it about you, which is very, very hard, right? In the moment when your emotions are involved, it may be a very illuminating experience. It doesn't sound like anyone crossed any
Boundaries. Yeah.
yeah, like physical boundaries, or even it doesn't even sound like there was like a deep emotional relationship, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's an opportunity to learn and hopefully talk it through before something else deeper may happen with someone else or in
Yeah.
another context. I knew someone who, this is a totally different situation, but they, during her wedding, one of her bridesmaids kissed her husband. So at the wedding was wild. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's another story for another day.
Right.
Well, what do you think of this? Should should the information be shared or not? Would you want to know?
Okay. If I'm thinking of my sisters now, I just cannot even imagine something like that happening. But if that happened, one, I would think they were super drunk. So if you say something, then they must have been like shit faced drunk. Like they don't know what they were doing. But then we're creating space. So like, look, when you're this drunk, this is what you have the capacity to do. You need to be able to put a mirror up to your face and know that this is what happened. So human behavior is so interesting. You know, there's some people who, when I was growing up, there's some women walk in the room and other women are just like grab their husbands a little tighter, you know? Now, if it was that type of person that has a reputation, definitely you have to tell me. If it's like maybe their judgment that I really think she was just drunk and didn't even recognize that it was me. You know, I don't know if she didn't. I could see if someone blew that off. I could see that. But again, if it's your sister, like if it's a distant friend or something like that, then it probably doesn't matter. But your sister, yeah, there's too many layers to that because that's just the ultimate form of disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't imagine.
And I feel like it'll come out eventually. Like things like that can't stay hidden. I think the longer you
Mm-hmm.
keep it as a secret, that it just becomes this bigger
Yeah.
thing.
That's why I was like, is this your blood sister or is it like your community
Your
sister?
African sister.
Yeah, yeah. Your 50th cousin removed 3 times, you know. You're just like, she's crazy. But if it's your sister, you came out from the same womb or same sperm, then yes, I would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough though.
It's tough. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And those things happen.
Far too often, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think this is it. We're pretty much there.
This is
yes, this is it.
awesome.
Can you share with us what you have going on? Thank you, first of all. I had such a great time.
Me
So
too.
if you can let the people know anything you have coming up, where we can follow you, all the good stuff.
Well, we have some new launches for Zolani Beauty coming out this summer that I'm very excited about. We're also going to be infusing some new tech into our website to really augment the shopping experience. So until it's released, let's just say that it's really cutting edge. So I'm very excited about that. So if you are interested in anything beauty related or just want to have conversations like this around beauty, colorism, you know, just putting your best foot forward, subscribe on our website. You don't have to buy makeup or anything. Just subscribe to ZolaniBeauty.com. We have a lot going on and we're ever evolving. And my personal website is coming up. It'll just be my name, NayahNdefru.com, which will encompass all of those things, speaking engagements, or, next time I'm going to be on No Ordinary Love podcast, it'll feature there. So yeah, my podcasts and everything, but you can follow me on Instagram by my name, Nayah Ndefru. And, you can follow along for all the things happening there.
Thanks for tuning in to the No Ordinary Love podcast. I'm your host, Roslyn Ona, reminding you that extraordinary love is out there. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. Until next time, embrace your own unique love story.